So I'm very honored that BJ asked me to share, and I hope you get something out of what I have to share, and that it's what you were hoping for, or definitely what God was hoping for, right? And, we actually have great memories of Kai and BJ too, because they were like this really cool intern couple from LA. And Brock and I were like, we're not that cool. And Kai, I don't know, did you come to Hawaii too? I thought you both came. And Kai's always worn his bandana. He just had long hair back then, but he's always worn a bandana. And anyway, I just have fond memories of seeing you guys. And like you said, we never got to be in the ministry together, but we've always admired you and Kai and your faithfulness to God. And even more so now, knowing all the things you guys have gone through after you came to visit our ministry a number of months ago. So anyway, I'm very grateful. And I wanted to share a little bit about me first. So one of the little known facts is I'm half Mexican. I know I don't look it. My mother's from Mexico. And I grew up very proud of my Mexican heritage. So I was always happy to talk about that. I actually became a disciple when I was in college, over 38 years ago now. That's where I met my now husband. And that's a whole nother story of how that came about. Someday I can share with you guys. But I was raised in a very traditional church, and I had a lot of questions about the Bible. And it was when I went to college that I really just grabbed a Bible and started reading it. And had a lot of questions, and I knew my now husband, Brock, knew a good bit about the Bible. So I asked him questions, and he pointed me to some scriptures, and the rest is history. So that's how I came about becoming a Christian. And, we both were studying civil engineering and had almost all our classes together too. So I think God really had a hand in that. And then Brock went and got his master's. And after he finished his master's, we got married and basically went straight into the ministry. And then we were in the Berkeley Church of Christ. So that really dates me. And then we moved to Boston to train for the ministry, and we're there about 2 years, and then got asked to lead the mission team to Hawaii, which changed the whole trajectory of our life. And I so dearly love the church there, and they're our family to this day. And I just feel so grateful God chose us for that. I don't know why or how, but we were just so grateful. But it was in Hawaii where both our boys were born, and my first son was born with Down syndrome. And I'll share a little bit more about that later, but it was a very emotional thing to go through, and, definitely challenged my devotion. It was definitely something that could cause distraction to that devotion. And, I was thinking about the title of this whole series, which I really love, Undistracted Devotion. And I thought, it kind of implies there's such thing as distracted devotion, but I think we all know that can't exist, because distracted devotion is no devotion at all. But I was thinking, just in our lives right now, what kind of distractions there are. And, first and foremost, all throughout the news, the pain and fear of war. And I don't know if any of you have joined Sean Wooten's prayer times on Facebook Live, but I've been doing that every day I can. And just the pain and the sorrow and the heaviness. I mean, every day I wake up in the morning thinking, God, have you answered our prayers yet? And I'm like waiting in expectation and turn on my phone to see if there's any news, but that's a distraction. And there's so much pain and suffering throughout the world, and in Africa and the Middle East. We don't even hear about those things, but it's all over. And that can be just COVID craziness. COVID's happening. I think Hong Kong is having their 5th wave. And we have a disciple in our ministry who's got relatives in the church in Hong Kong, 5th wave, China's shutting down now. Inflation, gas prices, the fear of where our finances are going to end up, the stock market crashing. And then not to mention school, work, our health, our marriage, our family, and our kids. I mean, I was just getting stressed writing the list and thinking about it, how many distractions we can have in our life that fight for our attention and fight for our devotion. So how do we stay devoted to God and really trusting in Him when life brings those unexpected and even painful challenges? And so, and I think every life brings those challenges. And the lesson I'm going to share today, it's more heart stuff, and I'm totally happy to do more practical and Q&A, but heart stuff that really applies to any sort of challenge in your life. I'm going to share, from being a mother of a child with special needs, but it really applies to anything. I think of Proverbs 14:10. It says, that every heart knows its own bitterness. And I really believe that's true, that what's bitter for me may not be bitter for you, but you have your hurts and pains, the things that can cause bitterness to you. And so we all have them, and we all need help dealing with them. And, when I was 6 months pregnant with Barrett, and again, he was my first pregnancy, first child. Well, actually, I think second pregnancy. I think I miscarried, but I had never gone to a doctor, but I think I did. But I was 6 months pregnant when I found out Barrett would be born with Down syndrome. And it was still pretty rare to find some that would find out ahead of time like that. Most parents I meet to this day found out the day of birth. I remember this specific spot in Queens Hospital in Honolulu where I broke down and started crying. I could start crying, talking about it. I remember thinking about calling. I felt so bad calling my mom. And I hate saying this, but I felt like I was telling her I was going to give her a defective grandchild. Like you never think about parents hearing that news and then having to call their family. And I didn't realize how much it would affect me, having to call my mom and think about, that I was letting her down. I know it's a weird way to think, but that's the way I felt. But I did have 3 months. I had 3 months to pray for a miracle, or 3 months to pray to accept God's will for my life. And Barrett was born with a pretty severe heart condition. That's actually how we first found out he was going to have Down syndrome. Was the heart, they found the heart defect first. And so then I just wanted to have my son survive birth, and he did. He had open heart surgery when he was 6 months old. His heart, the size of a quarter, had open heart surgery, and he's 30 years old now, and he's doing great. And so, he's been a joy to our life. But I've learned, I had so many ups and downs and learned so many lessons through having my son, and I'm going to try and just share a few tonight. And let me say that sometimes my son without disabilities is more challenging than my son with disabilities. So I kind of think everybody's got some sort of disability. That's where I live now. I think we all have something. But again, I think what I have to share will hopefully apply to any challenge you face in your life. But I wanted to read a passage in Matthew 17, and you can just listen or turn your phones to this or whatever, but Matthew 17, verse 14. And this is a passage about a parent with a special needs child. And it says, when they came to the crowd, a man approached Jesus and knelt before him. Lord, have mercy on my son, he said. He has seizures and is suffering greatly. Gosh, I get emotional just reading that. He often falls into the fire or into the water. I brought him to your disciples, but they could not heal him. Before you have a child with special needs, you see this passage as, wow, Jesus, how cool. Jesus is healing somebody. But after you have a child with special needs, you see, oh my goodness, the pain of this dad, seeing his son have seizures and throw himself into fire or water. And my heart just breaks seeing that. I feel so much for him. And I think it's true, whatever challenge we go through in our life, it changes the way we see passages in the Bible sometimes, right? Like that. But now I look at this and I feel like, oh, the dad is begging for mercy on his son. His son's suffering and there's no solutions. And the guys that were supposed to be able to help couldn't help. And there's, imagine how you would feel. I think of now my son's older and he's got different issues now. He's got, unfortunately, kind of entered the realm of mental health stuff. And I sometimes see him, he'll pull his hair and his face will get really red. And I'll think, Barrett, what do you feel? I'll just look at him and I'll feel that pain going, oh, I wish I knew how to help him. So I can relate to that feeling of there's no one with answers and no psychiatrist knows what to say about my son. So just when you think you've kind of got smooth sailing and you kind of figured out how to navigate things, sometimes God throws another, loop in life to you, right? But I think too, sometimes it's difficult to look past the circumstances and the pain and the suffering, and they distract us from devotion, just looking at the circumstances. And when you read verse 17, after the dad said, I brought them to your disciples, but they could not heal him, Jesus responds with, you unbelieving and perverse people. He saw it as a lack of faith. They were looking at circumstances and they were distracted from their devotion and distracted from really understanding what God can do. And I think, what we have to really do is learn not to let those things distract us. And I'm going to share with you just a few quick things that I feel like God's really taught me. The first thing is the value of vulnerability. And, I think honestly, this was probably one of my biggest lessons. And I know some people don't struggle with this because some people wear their emotions on their sleeve, right? I never did before. I do now. I cry at the drop of a hat now. But, when Barrett was born and the challenges we went through, I was not honest with God, with myself, even myself, and with my friends about how much pain it was for me. I felt like I had to be this example of faith. And yeah, we were leading a church at the time, but honestly, I would have put that on me even if I wasn't in leadership, because I would have felt I'm a disciple. I should believe in Romans 8:28 that God's going to work it for the good. That should be what I believe. And if I don't believe that, then I'm a really bad disciple. And I don't want to look at that. I don't want to admit that, because even that's adding pain on top of the pain. And so, I was, some people might think, well, that's, pretty noble to say you're going to hold on to Romans 8:28. And yeah, it's noble, but it wasn't honest. And that really hurt my heart. I think I was afraid that people, they wouldn't believe I'm a faithful woman of God, but I think I could also get fearful that people would think I didn't want my son or didn't love my son. As a matter of fact, I have had a woman, it's a disciple, who came up to me and said a number of times, remember when you confessed you hated Barrett? And Barrett's my son with Down syndrome. And I have never hated Barrett. And I've never confessed I hated Barrett. So I'm like, how did she get that from things I said? I just let it go because you got to pick your battles, right? But I was afraid that people might think I didn't love him or I didn't believe in God's plan. But there were some things that were so hard for me that I never shared. Like in Hawaii, and Heidi will remember this, we would have these beach picnics on holidays, which are the most fun things. Everybody goes to the beach on holidays in Hawaii. It was super fun. But Barrett, as a baby with Down syndrome, it was so hard. He was putting sand in his mouth all the time. He was just it was just got to the point where I did not enjoy doing anything with the whole church. But I did not share that with anyone. I felt like, I have to be this good example of this woman that goes to everything with her dragging her special needs child. How much better it would have been had I been open and allowed the sisters in my life to help me. But I didn't do that. Other times when, he was my first child, so I didn't know what's a regular first grader like. I didn't know, but then we go to school and I'd see these other first graders putting their graham cracker, house together for Christmas, right? And Barrett couldn't do any of it. And I'd go home and I'd just cry. And I didn't tell anybody. The worst time was Barrett has this thing for ripping things. If there's anything with a little hole, he rips it. We had a sofa in our downstairs area, had a little hole. I went upstairs. I don't know what I did. I came back and he had ripped all the upholstery off our sofa. And I just broke down crying, and I ran upstairs to my bathroom and I told God I hated my life. I literally said, I hate my life. And then I right away was like, I'm so sorry, God. I'm so sorry. I don't hate my life. I'm so sorry. I don't know if I thought God was going to strike me with lightning or what, but I never told anyone that I hated my life. I mean, that's like such a major thing. And I think God had to really put me through that. It really started, and I really believe when you harden your heart in one area, you harden your heart in all areas. And it really started affecting our marriage, because I wasn't vulnerable about what I was going through, I was hardening my heart. And so it really affected our marriage. And Brock and I were, we had no emotional intimacy. We talked about how we were like good business partners with the family, but we really weren't close anymore. And it took getting to that point, which I never want to get back to finally get open and get vulnerable and really start sharing with people how I was feeling. And I tell you, if you aren't able to admit where your heart's at, then you really can't get help, right? And I was finally able to admit how brokenhearted I was. And a few scriptures, Psalm 34, verse 18, it says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." The other one I didn't write down, but I always think about how a bruised reed he won't break, and a smoldering wick he won't snuff out. That God may allow us to go through tough things, but he'll never break us. He'll never snuff us out. And I love that about God. Psalm 147, verse 3, this was a hard one for me. It says, "He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds." And this one was a hard one for me because I thought, no, I still feel broken. It's still painful. I mean, Barrett's 30 years old and it's still painful. And then I came across Revelation 21:4, where it says, "He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." And you know what I realized is that the pain goes away in heaven. Yeah, it gets easier, but it doesn't go away. And I realized that I used to almost feel bad. Like I thought, I must not be a very good Christian because I'm still feeling brokenhearted by this. And I think there was a part of me that felt like even being vulnerable about that, people would think I don't love my son. And or I'm not grateful for him. And I tell you, we are the family we are because of Barrett. We are so grateful for him and all the challenges, but it's still painful. And I realized, gosh, if I lost one of my children, I can't imagine that pain ever going away. So yeah, God heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds, but maybe it doesn't fully happen until we get to heaven. Or, I thought healing's not really what we expect. It's not the pain going away, but healing comes in the form of growing in your devotion to God. It comes in the form of growing in your friendships and your love for one another, because you're really holding each other up. It comes from helping the non-Christian women in your life because you're vulnerable about what you're going through, and it helps them. And then when you see God use your suffering, use your pain, it brings a little bit of healing into your life. And you end up feeling like, okay, this is hard, but I'm grateful. And that's healing. And, I thought the pain, it'll always be painful for me because a new challenge comes all the time. Like I said, just when I think we've kind of hit smooth sailing with Barrett, or really with anything in life, some wrench gets thrown in and I'm like, okay, I got to figure out something all over again. So, but really, how vulnerable and honest are you about things you go through and things on your heart? And sometimes I felt like I was a broken record. I started talking about it so much, but women would assure me, no, Anne, it helps us to hear. It helps us because it helps us be more compassionate and more empathetic. And it helps us to know what you're going through so we can help you and be a support to you. But, I would still have to fight that. And even now I get sad thinking my younger son, Nick, he's now 29 years old. And I think, he's the only one to get married. He's the only one that'll be able to give me grandkids. He's the only, and I can still feel sad. I feel sad that he won't have cousins from my side of the family. And oh no, he's going to be more close to his wife's side of the family. Like I get fearful of that. Even now, I'm fearful of those kind of things. And I have to talk about it. I have to get open and pray and get my devotion with God straight. The other thing I want to share about was the other lesson I've learned is just the view of God's sovereignty. The view of God's sovereignty. And, when I got pregnant with Barrett, a friend of mine was studying the Bible. she was from a pretty religious background, and she came from a church that said, if you just say the word, it'll happen. So she's challenged me, and you need to claim this miracle that Barrett won't have Down syndrome. I don't think we'd named him yet, but you know what I mean? And I remember looking at her, and she goes, if you have enough faith, it'll happen. It'll be a miracle. And I remember looking at her, and I told her, you know what? I think it takes more faith to say, God, your will be done and not my will. And that, I don't even know where that came from when I said that to her, but to this day, it's been such a testimony to me. There's, we all know the passage in Mark 11, 22 through 24, and I hated this passage, but it's the one that says, if you really believe in your heart and pray and really believe in your heart, it will be done. And after Barrett was born, because I did pray for a miracle, but I always said, but no, God, your will be done, not mine. But I would read that passage and I would say, but God, you didn't give me that miracle. And so for the longest time, I didn't like that passage because I thought, again, I don't know if I'm too hard on myself or what, but I just thought I just must not have believed enough. But I always go back to, no, I prayed, God, your will be done. And I need to trust in your sovereignty and your plan for my life. Lamentations 3, verse 37, it says, who can speak and have it happen if the Lord has not decreed it? And I had to think, do I really believe that? Ecclesiastes 7:13, consider what God has done. Who can straighten what he has made crooked? Proverbs 19:21, many are the plans of a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. And I had to really wrestle with, am I going to trust God's purpose and plan for my life? And, are we willing to really even grab hold of that plan, even sometimes when they're painful things? And like I said, I know our family, even our son, our younger son, Nick, and I prayed for an amazing brother, and God totally answered that prayer in my son. But Nick would not be the man he is today if he didn't have his brother. I know that. And I am so grateful how much Barrett impacted his younger brother's life. I realized that, every now and then when I think, God, this is too hard, this is really painful, it's my selfishness. It's me not wanting to feel any more pain. It's me wanting life to be a little easier. If you ask me, would you wish Barrett could be different? Well, I wish Barrett could not be different, but not have the challenge he has that brings me pain. That's kind of, that's impossible. But it's because I don't want to feel any more pain. I'm tired of crying. I'm tired of feeling bad. I'm tired of having another challenge. But again, it's not just our kids with special needs that bring that. A lot of times it's our kids without special needs that can bring pain. So ultimately I thought, okay, God has a purpose and plan for my life, but what can I control? I can control my devotion to him. I can control my faith and trust in his plan. I can control really believing his plan's best. And I think that really comes from a brokenness, a godly sorrow when we realize when we're in the driver's seat, we mess up our life. So we might as well let God take over. I'm sorry. That when we really have that brokenness, then yeah, we can submit to God's plan and we can trust even in the pain that it's the best way to go. Because we have pain when we do things our own way, right? You're going to have pain whether you're on God's side or you're not on God's side. I'd rather be on God's side because life can be painful. I thought about how, I could definitely work on my faithfulness too, my love for God, and then share that with my kids. And, these are a few little practicals, but I tell you what, I shared scriptures with my kids growing up. I would share when my kids got older, especially my son, Nick, I shared quiet times with him. I shared I wanted God to be real to my kids. I've shared answered prayers all the time. It's to the point where now my son, Nick, will say, oh, you want a prayer answered? You should have my mom pray because God answers her prayers. I mean, I don't really feel that way, but I love it that my kids feel that way. Right. So, I want, especially my son, Nick. So this is speaking to those without with children without disabilities, I really wanted Nick to understand God's presence. And so I would always talk about that. And I would tell him when he was leaving for school, especially when he was in high school, I can't be with you, but God will be with you. Sometimes I said that as an encouragement, and sometimes I said it as a threat, like, I can't see what you do, but God sees what you do. But I never said it really threatening way, but I wanted him to know, because he was the only kid from our church at his school. So I wanted him to know, you might feel alone, but God is with you every step of the way. And so I wanted him to have, really believe in God's presence. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful he really feels that now. So I think, I may not be able to control everything, because really it's God's sovereignty that's in control. But the things I can control, I want to do it God's way. I want to do it being devoted to him, because I knew if I wasn't, my kids wouldn't, or there'd be a worse chance of them doing it, right? It's not perfectly. Our kids don't turn out perfect just because we think we're doing things the right way. But and then just the last thing, and I kind of touched on this already, but the last thing is just getting victory through our sorrow. Victory through our sorrows. And to me, that just means don't waste your sorrow. And when you go through something hard, share it with people. Be open, be vulnerable, because it really does impact people, especially people in your life that have no one to talk to. Like you at your office, you may have a number of women you can call up on the phone when you've had a hard day, but some of the women in your office have no one to talk to, and probably can't even talk to their husbands. So we need to remember not to let it strengthen you, let it strengthen your devotion to God, and let it strengthen your friendships. I think when we use our situations to strengthen our devotion, it helps us become more loving and compassionate and giving and empathetic. And then God can really use us to be his vehicle of blessing. When we found out Barrett was going to be born with Down syndrome, a brother in the ministry in LA gave us a call, and we were in Hawaii at the time, as I said, and read John chapter 9 to us. And John chapter 9 is about the man born blind. And the disciples said, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And so this brother read this passage, and all I could see at that time was who sinned. Because I really thought, oh no, is God punishing me? Did I do something wrong in my life? Or maybe I'm like so hard-hearted that God had to put a really hard thing in my life so that I would stay faithful to him. Like, I'm that bad of a disciple. I need that. And I mean, my mind can go all sorts of places. I did not hear the very end of that passage, and I'm going to pull it up. I wasn't even going to read it, but I just think it's such an important point. So now I have to open my Bible on my phone, because I like this version that I had open on my phone, but it's just John chapter 9. And it says, neither this man, in verse 3, neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. And now I see that verse. Now I see, after all the things we go through, and not just having a child with special needs, but getting let go of the ministry, getting through a lot of hard things in life, health stuff, whatever, that it's God allows us to go through those things so we can display the power of God. And I think when we really do work on having that undistracted devotion, it doesn't mean being perfect. It doesn't mean having the right responses. You've heard all the bad responses I've had, but when you get open about it and you let God work in your heart and you let God work through the people around you, you grow in your devotion, and it displays God's power. It displays an awesome God that helps people want to get devoted to him because they see how awesome he is through you. And that's a great thing. And so don't waste those sorrows, find victory in that sorrow. So anyway, I hope that's helped tonight. And, I hope there was something you could, take a little nugget of. And I'm super grateful to be with you guys. And thank you for the opportunity to share.
Thank you so much for sharing, Anne. Seriously, it has just been incredible to hear your story. And even for me, just in so many ways, like I can identify with what you've gone through. And right, I'm not a parent. I don't have a child with special needs. But the same like fears that you've had about being vulnerable and honest and open and letting people see right those sides that we can feel are unpresentable, those sides where like what you were talking about, like, well, this is what I should be as a disciple. Like I should be like, I can't tell God I hate my life. Like I'm not supposed to hate my life. Or that fear, even like, I can't tell you how many times I've had that fear of like, you let something slip out and you're like, oh God, don't, like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Like, and it's just, right. Like, I think it's so amazing. I think that like, honestly, as you were talking about like being more vulnerable, I think vulnerability also helps us to see God's heart for us in a way that we couldn't before. I think, right, there's the scripture, something I turn to a lot in 1 John 4:18, where John writes, there is no fear in love. The perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. And I can't tell you how many scriptures there are that says like God is love. And it just is amazing how when we let go of fear, when we stop letting our fear control us, like God is, we're able to see God clearer. And I see that through your story. And I'm so grateful for you being vulnerable with us and sharing it with all of us. And I think, right, even if you weren't vulnerable back then, God has given you many opportunities to be vulnerable now. And it doesn't, I can tell it doesn't get easier. Like those emotions are real and raw. But I can say with certainty that you're not alone in feeling those things, and that it's very, right. I think, like you said, it's part of learning to live in undistracted devotion is learning to work through all of that and learning to let other people in. So I just want to thank you, and just share how your message affected me and how I like really just want to thank you for what you shared.
I took all kinds of notes. And I loved a few things. Just realizing that, he binds up the wounds, but he doesn't like necessarily get rid of them, because like you said, the pain goes away when we're in heaven.
Okay, we've got Galina raising her hand. Did I say that right?
Yes, Galina. First of all, I put it in a chat, but I wanted to say my son is in his 27 studying Bible, and I think the changes started to happen when with him, and where he actually wanted to start studying Bible. And he's a Kingdom kid. I've been at church since '95. So, and when Nick, actually Anne's younger son, was came into the group, and all of a sudden my son, who is on the spectrum, had somebody who understands him and is very patient with him, and is not harsh in his statements, understanding that those statements, what he's saying might be because he's a socially awkward, and not because his heart is hard. Right. Which is sometimes when you see a kid on a spectrum, he just doesn't have social skills. The things that we tell, oh, you got to be more loving, you got to be more communicating, you got to be calling, and he takes everything in a way that might not look good, but Nick understands him. So I am very appreciative, actually, that level of understanding that he has. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm happy I made it to that tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Galina. I think even just what you shared, it just reminds, like both of these stories, like it helps me see God, like the big picture a little bit more. I think it's so easy when we're going through something hard to kind of be in the weeds and be in like our thing. And right, I think I see how God was working through Barrett and through Nick and through that relationship, and how that shaped Nick so that he could be who your son needed, Galina. I don't particularly think that patience and compassion and like kindness are generally like traits that you would find in young teenage boys, like Patience especially, like I can't imagine that naturally occurring frequently. But it's encouraging, I think, even to see God working right through that relationship between Barrett and Nick, and how that shaped Nick. And like you said multiple times, Anne, like Nick wouldn't be who he was without Barrett. And
Right.
I think it just brings, at least for me, it just brings me such comfort and peace to know that like there's so much more going on than what I can see.
Oh, right. This message is for all of us. I'm a grandmother and even grown grandkids. I also have a grandson that's on the spectrum, and now he's in his early 20s. There's gender issues, so all that's coming up.
Yeah.
It's been coming up, but now it's progressing and having to do. It's like you said, sorrow, heartache. Can understand it, but prayer definitely helps. I haven't been as open about it because it's such a sensitive subject, and not everybody knows what to even think about it. But I have been open, but maybe I need to be more. I want to thank you for all the scriptures you used, and thank you for using that Matthew 11 scripture. I thought I was the only one that ever said, I don't believe that scripture. I would share that in women's Bible studies, and they would look at me like they wouldn't know what to say. I thought, I don't believe that scripture. I know it's true, but that's one of those things you're going to ask when you get to heaven. Because it says if you have faith, and I had faith. I really knew I had faith. And I prayed for something specific, and I had faith, and it didn't happen. And I thought, oh God, what? I don't get it. I don't get it. So thank you. You're the only one that has ever said you had the same reaction to that scripture. So we'll both have to ask God.
There you go.
So thank you for your message. It's wonderful.
Thank you for sharing, Bobby. Thank you so much. Okay, I see Margie.
Okay, I am going through a very large sorrow because my sister's dying.
Oh.
She's on hospice as of Friday of last week.
Oh my.
And her heart's failed. Her kidney is still working again, but she's definitely, they can't do anything else for her. She was my best friend. She was my confidant. She was my everything. And just the thought of losing her is really, really hard. And I know it's my sorrow because it's my loss. And yet it hurts so bad. And I want the hurt to stop, but I know it's not going to until it's over. But in the meantime, I just keep trying to pray my way through what it feels like. I had 6 siblings and we're down to 2. All the rest are gone. So I'm like, God, what kind of test is this? Am I going to stay faithful and know that what you're doing, there's something in that? There's a silver lining somewhere in there, but I'm not sure yet. I see it, God, and it's really hard to see it right now.
Yeah. And sometimes I think we won't see it this side of heaven. I don't know. A lot of times we want answers, but we don't always get them. That's the hard thing. Thanks for sharing, though. I appreciate that. I know that's not easy to share, and I will write down to pray for you, Margie, and for your sister.
I'm so sorry, Margie. Thank you for sharing that with us. We'll definitely be praying for you. Okay, I see that BJ has raised her hand.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is just so good. So very good, Anne. Margie, God is speaking. Just take all of these scriptures that Anne laid out for us tonight and just rest with that. Margie, Anne said so many incredible things like pain goes away in heaven. Those special moments. I love when she said, every heart knows its bitterness, so none of us escape it. Doesn't make it easy. I'm not trying to downplay that, but God just wrapped Himself around you tonight by having Anne here sharing. So just hopefully that'll bring a little bit of solace. Anne, I just want to throw a quick question out there. I know because Bobby mentioned it as well. You know, when you're going through particularly something that not everyone, quote unquote, goes through, someone with special needs or someone who's dealing with gender issues, all those, sometimes we can get advice, direction that can be very harsh or misunderstood. How did you manage to get through that? Because that brings a bitterness all of its own, you know, as you're trying to find your way to what is right, what is wrong, who should I listen to, who shouldn't I listen to? How did you manage to get through that? Because when Bobby mentioned it, I just thought it'd be a great follow-up question for you.
Yeah, and that is a great question. I think all of us have to have those people in our lives who are safe people too, that we have to then get vulnerable about the bitterness of our reaction. And sometimes, you know, it might still be good advice. It just might be hard advice to take. But I think we have to get open with God and with other people, even about how hard something can hurt when someone says something in a harsh way or in a way that where they're not really understanding, or they're expecting us to be at this level or this point when we're still down here. And you know, so that does bring up bitterness and doubt, self-doubt sometimes, and even not just self-doubt, but God doubt, right? And so we have to have those people in our life we can talk to about that. And obviously I would think that person that responded in that way is probably not the safe person to talk to. So that's what I would do. I've had some people in my life that like when I shared about that sister that would tell me, remember when you said you hated Barrett? I just had some sisters I could go to and talk to and say, I never said that. What is she talking about? And, and it was just, they just helped me let it go. So I think there's situations that it's just not even worth correcting. It's, and most people she wasn't trying to be mean. She was trying to help me with something. And I think people's motives are generally good. And so don't look at it as someone being badly motivated. They just may not know. But God can even still use that to strengthen you in your devotion to Him and your devotion to your friends.
That's awesome. Well, unless anyone else have any questions, we're going to go ahead and close out this hour. So Ariana, see if I missed anyone. I can't see everybody on the screen.
So I'm from San Diego, and thank you so much for what you shared tonight. Really is a very difficult way to be so vulnerable and open, because it's your kids and it's something that you love so much, and it's so difficult to share about your children. And but thank you for having that kind of heart that you wanted to be so open to for us to learn, because I feel like I learned so much on what you were sharing. I don't have a special need kids, but I have a special needs husband, and so it's like you saying, it was so difficult, going out and just feeling kind of weird and trying to protect him, and then you try to protect your loved one, and it's difficult because people are looking at you or something, or you feel like people are looking at you, even in among disciples, you feel kind of awkward, and so but you share so many scriptures about how God give us comfort in times of pain, and like you say, even now you have times when you have pain, and I do too. Even now, I've been married for many years. Even now I still have pain when I see something, or but I look at this scripture, And I think we will never, like you say, we will never stop having pain or stop mourning, and until we die and go to heaven.
Amen. Well, sisters, we're going to go ahead and close it out. And Anne, again, God spoke through you. He took your message and he split it into 25, 30 different ways to make sure that each one of us heard what it is that we needed to hear directly from him. So as strange as it may sound, I'm so thankful for the suffering and the pain that you have gone through, because it has produced an incredible woman of God, but it's also pouring out on all the rest of us. And tonight we benefit from you. So thank you. All right, sisters, thank you for a beautiful hour of your time. And we will be back here next week with Rosa Santillan from San Diego. And this will go up in the morning. This is a must hear over and over and over again. So Anne, thank you again.
Thank you. Love you, everybody.
Good night, everybody.